How many people voted for your plan?
What do you mean by that? Sorry.
Well, you've set out a significant change of direction from the Conservative government that you were being part of for many, many years. But how many people voted for you to do that?
Well, people in 2019 who voted Conservative voted for a successful country where we are levelling up all parts of the country and where we're driving growth, enterprise and opportunity. Now, any government has to deal with the circumstances it faces. And we face this situation of, which was unforeseen, huge energy costs, rising inflation due to the war in Ukraine and the aftermath of COVID.
But you know
we
very
are
well,
delivering,
Prime Minister, that a small number of people in the Conservative Party, tens of thousands rather than the whole country, voted for you in the leadership contest, perfectly legitimately. But do you fear that you have put the country on a path that it didn't ask for because you believe very strongly that it will lead to growth? Finally, what happens if it doesn't work?
Well, what people voted for in 2019, when they voted for Conservative, sometimes for the first time in many years, is they voted for a different future. They voted for investment into their towns and cities. They voted for higher wages. They voted for economic growth. And that is what our plan will deliver.
Are you absolutely committed to abolishing the 45p tax rate for the wealthiest people in the country?
Yes. And it is part, Laura, it is part of an overall package of making our tax system simpler and lower. But I think it's worth noting, in the package we announced, the vast majority of that package is the energy package.
And we've talked a lot about that, but I want to talk about this.
It's national insurance. The 45p rate actually raises very little and makes our tax system more complicated. And we need to move away. We need to move away from the idea that everything is about how we redistribute resources. We also need to make sure we have got a tax system that's competitive internationally, and it's helping us bring in the investment, get people into work,
and you've
get
made that
people
very clear
wanting
that the
to
economy
get
is
up the
going
career
is your
ladder.
priority. You've made that very clear. Can I ask you, Prime Minister, did you discuss scrapping the top rate with your whole cabinet?
No. No, we didn't. It was a decision that the Chancellor made.
Do you think that that is the right way to go about developing what has become a very controversial policy? You say it doesn't cost that much money, but it's a big decision, isn't it? If you'd been in Boris Johnson's cabinet and he had announced something like that without asking you, how would you have felt?
We have committed, and I committed during the leadership campaign, to make our system more competitive, to lower our taxes and to simplify our taxes. And I think that's fundamentally important. Now, when budgets are developed, they are developed in a very confidential way. They're very market sensitive. Of course, the cabinet is briefed, but it's never the case on budgets that they are something that is created by the whole cabinet. The principles, though, are extremely clear. What the government is trying to avoid is a serious economic slowdown that would have real difficulties for people. Now, I did want to answer your question, Laura, that you asked me about the issues we've seen this week. So I'm afraid there is an issue that interest rates are going up around the world, and we do have to face that, and we do have to do that. But I do want to say to people, I understand their worries about what has happened this week, and I do stand by the package we announced, and I stand by the fact that we announced it quickly because we had to act. But I do accept we should have laid the ground better. I do accept that.
You accept you should have laid the ground better.
I have learnt from that. I have learnt from that, and I will make sure that in future we do a better job of laying the ground.
What many of your MPs fear is, because interest rates are on the way up, because the cost of government borrowing is going up, as we've seen this morning, the fear is that the consequences will be more taxpayers' cash will be eaten up, there'll be less money for everything else. Are you going to cut public spending?
I don't accept that argument, and I will do what I can to win the hearts and minds of my colleagues across the Conservative Party, because I believe we need to grow the size of the pie. That's fundamentally what we need to do as a country, and we've had 2 decades of relatively low growth.
But
I'm answering your question, Laura. what low growth means. Low growth means people aren't able to get the jobs they deserve.
No, my
they
question
mean
was whether
lower
you're going to cut
wages, and
public
they mean
spending,
less
Minister.
money for public services.
They mean, but are
So
you
this is why
going to cut
growth
public
is so
spending?
important, and that is at the core of our economic
policy. But are you going to cut public spending? Because one of your cabinet ministers said this week, Simon Clarke, he said, we look at a state which is extremely large and we have to look at how we can make sure that is in full alignment with a lower tax economy. Now, what does that mean?
Well, I believe in getting value for money for the taxpayer. That's very important to me. And the way that we are going to improve our economy is, for example, helping more people get into work. That saves the government money, but it also contributes to the economy. So what we will have is a long-term plan for reform, help more people get into work, make our economy more productive, get better value for money for the taxpayer.
But Prime Minister, I've asked you if you're going to cut spending on public services. Are you going to cut spending on public services?
Well, what I'm going to do is make sure we get value for money for the taxpayer. But I am very, very committed to making sure we've got excellent frontline public services. And I'm not going to go into what the Chancellor will announce in his medium-term fiscal plan.
At the end of November.
He's going to announce that very shortly. It will come together with an OBR forecast. That's very important.
But hang on.
But my approach is to help people get through this very difficult winter, and it's a problem we're facing internationally.
But Prime Minister, this is quite a straightforward question.
Support.
Are you going to cut public spending on public services? And I've asked you a couple of times, and normally the fact that you won't answer it directly suggests that you're going to.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't, because I can't exactly set out what is going to be in this plan. What I can promise is we're going to reduce debt as a proportion of GDP.
By when?
But the point in the medium term, and we will set out exactly what that is when we put out the medium term fiscal plan. But the point about reducing debt as a proportion of GDP is it all depends on how fast the economy is growing. And the key thing is to get the economy growing faster so the pie is bigger and we can afford more money for great public services.
We had an email from a viewer last night saying, we're very grateful for the help we've had with our energy bills, but the effect of the mini budget or mortgages has meant hundreds more each month for us in mortgage payments. Your energy help may help millions of people. It may be generous.
Well, it will help millions of people.
But this cost is being wiped out by other costs and increases in mortgages. What is the logic of giving people money to help with their energy bills if they then lose some of it because their mortgage goes through the roof because of the consequence of the decisions you've made?
Well, I understand that people are worried and people are struggling. It's a very difficult time. We have to look at the mortgage issue
what does that mean?
Separately, which is the Bank of England set interest rates, not the government. This has rightly been independent since 1997, and we are facing a world in which interest rates are rising. In fact, our interest rates set by the Bank of England are lower than those of the Federal Reserve and lower than those other countries.
But do you acknowledge that some people are going to end up being worse off because their mortgage has gone up by more than their energy bill is being controlled by the government for you? Do you accept that?
We want to do all we can to help homeowners. We've helped with stamp duty. That was one of the announcements in the mini budget. But ultimately, interest rates are a matter for the Independent Bank of England, and the Independent Bank of England do have to look at what is happening around the world.
But we're asking about mortgages, not interest rates, and mortgages are not set by the Bank of England. Mortgage rates are a product of all sorts of factors, including decisions the government made.
The interest rates are a key factor in mortgage rates, and those are set by the Bank of England, and they're somewhat dependent on the global market. So, Laura, we are not dealing with the issues we're dealing with in isolation. We're dealing with these issues in a world where there's a slowing global economy, where there are rising interest rates, where there is huge inflation, mainly driven by energy caused by Vladimir Putin's war. And I, as Prime Minister, and the Chancellor have to deal with that in the way that we think will help people in Britain most get through these very, very difficult short-term circumstances, but put our country on the best long-term footing.